Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez just made the biggest mistake of her career. She attacked JD Vance's poverty story on live television, called him a poverty tourist, a fake populist, a hillbilly con artist selling struggle content. She forgot one small detail. Vance actually grew up poor. She grew up in Yorktown Heights, median household income $142,000. His response started with 5 words that turned her face white. Let's talk about your dress. You're about to watch the working class champion get exposed as the biggest fraud in Congress. The hearing room in the Dirksen Senate office building was standing room only. Cameras from every major network lined the back wall like soldiers at attention. C-SPAN was running dual feeds. The hearing was titled Economic Policy and the American Working Class, the kind of bland Washington label designed to hide the fact that everyone in the building knew exactly what was about to happen. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez walked in flanked by 3 staffers carrying binders they would never open. She wore a tailored blazer over a crisp white blouse, the outfit of a woman who had dressed for a camera, not a committee. She took her seat at the witness table, adjusted her microphone, and glanced at the gallery with the confidence of someone who had already written the headline in her head. Vice President JD Vance sat in the presiding chair on the dais. Dark suit, no tie, a glass of water, and a legal pad with 6 tabbed folders stacked neatly beside it. He said nothing. He watched AOC settle in the way a man watches weather, coming across flat country, patient, curious, in no particular hurry. Chairman Grassley opened the hearing. Introductory remarks, procedural formalities. Then he recognized Representative Ocasio-Cortez for her opening statement. AOC leaned into the microphone. Mr. Vice President, I want to talk about the working class. The real working class, not the version you packaged and sold to a publishing house for a 7-figure advance. She paused. The gallery shifted, cameras tightened. You wrote a book called Hillbilly Elegy. You made millions of dollars telling America that poverty is a character flaw, that people like your own mother failed because they didn't try hard enough. You commodified Appalachian suffering. You turned your family's worst moments into a product, and then you used that product to climb into the ruling class you now serve. Vance wrote something on his legal pad. He didn't look up. You talk about bootstraps, but you married into an elite academic family. You talk about the forgotten American worker, but you went to Yale Law School and became a venture capitalist. You talk about authenticity, but you called Donald Trump America's dictator and then became his vice president. She straightened her papers with a sharp tap against the table. You are not a populist, Mr. Vice President. You are a cosplay populist, a poverty tourist who visited hardship long enough to write a book about it, then moved to a mansion and never looked back. You are the mascot of the billionaire class dressed in working class drag. She looked directly at the camera. The people I represent in the Bronx, in Queens, they see through this. They know what a real struggle looks like, and they know a fraud when they see one. She sat back, crossed her arms. The Democratic side of the gallery gave her a small wave of applause. A progressive journalist in the front row was already typing a headline, Times AOC eviscerates Vance on working class hypocrisy. Vance set down his pen. He looked at AOC for 3 full seconds without speaking. Are you finished, Representative? His voice was flat, no warmth in it, no hostility either, just a question. I have more to say about him, sure you do. Vance picked up the first folder, but you've spent 15 minutes attacking my background, my family, and my integrity. I'd like to respond if you don't mind. He opened the folder. You want to talk about the working class, Representative? Let's talk about the working class. Let's start with what you were wearing the last time you claimed to represent them. AOC's chin lifted slightly, an almost imperceptible movement, but the cameras caught it. Let's talk about your dress. Vance pulled a photograph from the folder and held it toward the cameras. AOC at the 2021 Met Gala. White gown cascading to the floor. Tax the rich painted across the back in red letters. Behind her, a wall of photographers and celebrities in outfits that cost more than most Americans earn in a month. September 13th, 2021, the Metropolitan Museum of Art Costume Institute Gala. Tickets cost $35,000 per person. You attended wearing a custom-designed gown by Aurora James. The dress said, "Tax the rich." The ticket price said, "You are the rich." AOC's fingers moved to the edge of the table. The Met Gala was a platform to deliver a message. The message was on the dress, Representative. The hypocrisy was wearing it. Vance sat down the photograph and pulled out a document with House Ethics Committee letterhead. On July 25, 2025, the House Ethics Committee released a 26-page report on your attendance at that event. Their conclusion, and I'm quoting the official finding, was that you impermissibly accepted gifts in violation of the House gift rule. He held up the relevant page. Specifically, you accepted free admission for your partner, a $35,000 gift. You failed to pay full fair market value for the designer apparel you wore. And this is the part that interests me. Several payments to vendors were, and I'm quoting, significantly delayed and in several cases did not occur until after the Office of Congressional Conduct began an investigation. He set down the report. You didn't pay until someone started asking questions. That's not an oversight. That's a pattern. AOC's voice sharpened. The committee also found that I proactively took steps to comply. They did. They said you tried, and you still violated the rules. Vance pulled out a second set of documents, FEC campaign filings flagged with yellow tabs. But the Met Gala isn't the only time your socialist brand and your spending habits didn't quite line up. He spread the filings across his section of the dais. Your most recent campaign filings show nearly $50,000 spent in Puerto Rico during a single trip. Luxury hotel suites, upscale catering, a venue rental at the same location where the musical artist Bad Bunny was performing. He looked up. $50,000 of donor money from people who gave you $25 and $50 because they believed you were fighting for them, and you spent it at a Bad Bunny concert. A ripple moved through the gallery. AOC's lead staffer, a young woman in a navy blazer, stopped typing and looked at the floor. There's also the Vanity Fair cover $14,000 outfit. He ticked items on his fingers without looking at notes. The Tesla, $59,000, manufactured by a man you've publicly called a threat to democracy. The luxury apartment in Washington. The first-class flights while telling your constituents to reduce their carbon footprint. Vance closed the folder and looked at AOC directly. You called me a poverty tourist, Representative, but I grew up in a house where the heat got turned off in January because my mother spent the money on addictive substances. I wore secondhand clothes to a school where kids made fun of the holes in my shoes. My grandmother, Mama, fed me on a disability check and kept a loaded firearm under her mattress because she didn't trust the neighborhood after dark. His voice didn't rise, it dropped. That's poverty, Representative. Not Yorktown Heights, where you grew up. Median household income, $142,000 a year. Not the Met Gala, not Bad Bunny concerts paid for with donor money. He reached for his water glass. I wore military boots to Iraq. You wore a tax, the rich dress to a $35,000 party, and then you walked into this room and called me a fake populist. He took a drink and set the glass down. Let's talk about your campaign finances, because that story is even more interesting. Vance opened the second folder, thicker than the first, tabbed in 3 colors. He laid it flat on the dais and pulled out a diagram, a flow chart, showing the relationships between multiple organizations with arrows connecting them and dollar amounts beside each arrow. Representative Ocasio-Cortez, when you first ran for Congress in 2018, your campaign was supported by a political action committee called Justice Democrats PAC. Your campaign manager was a man named Saikat Chakrabarty. Is that correct? AOC's expression was careful. Sykott was my campaign manager, yes, and after you won, you made him your chief of staff in Congress. The man who ran your campaign moved directly into running your congressional office. Vance traced the flowchart with his pen. Now, Mr. Chakrabarty also co-founded and controlled Justice Democrats' PAC. He simultaneously controlled another entity called Brand New Congress PAC, and he controlled a private company called Brand New Congress LLC. He looked up 3 organizations, 1 man. Your man. Vance pointed to the arrows on the diagram. According to FEC complaints and financial records, approximately $885,000 flowed from the 2 PACs into the LLC, the private company. The PACs classified these payments as strategic consulting, but an LLC, unlike a PAC, is not required to report how it spends its money. It's a black box. He set down the pen. A former Federal Election Commission commissioner reviewed the complaint and publicly stated there was, and in paraphrasing, more than enough evidence to justify a civil investigation by the FEC and enough evidence for the Justice Department to seriously consider a criminal investigation. AOC leaned into her microphone. Those were bogus complaints filed by conservative interest groups trying to the FEC isn't a conservative interest group. Representative. And your chief of staff, the man at the center of this, resigned 2 weeks after the complaints were filed. Vance's voice carried the flat precision of someone reading a witness' prior statement back to them. Innocent people don't resign in the middle of a scandal, Representative. They fight. They produce records. They clear their name. He pulled out a stack of printed tweets, AOC's own words blown up to readable size. He held up the first one. January 2019, you tweeted, "We need to get dark money out of politics." The American people deserve to know who is funding their representatives. That's a direct quote, he said. He said it beside the flowchart. $885,000 moved from PACs you controlled into a private company your chief of staff controlled, where it disappeared from public view. That is, by any definition, dark money. He held up another tweet. March 2019, you tweeted, "If you're hiding where your money comes from, you're probably hiding what it's being spent on." Your words, Representative, not mine. He placed the tweets side by side with the FEC filings, arranging them carefully so the cameras could capture both. You spent your entire career telling America that dark money is destroying democracy, then you built a dark money machine. The only difference between you and the lobbyists you attack is that your shell companies have better names. AOC's hands were flat on the table now, pressing down as if holding herself in place. The structure of those organizations has been fully explained. There was no, then where's the money? Representative Vance's voice cut clean. $885,000 went into Brand New Congress LLC. The LLC is not required to disclose its expenditures. Your chief of staff who controlled it resigned. What did the money buy? Silence. You'll take that as another question you'd rather not answer. Vance closed the second folder and reached for the third. Now let's talk about jobs, since you came here to lecture me about the working class. Vance didn't open the third folder immediately. Instead, he picked up his legal pad and uncapped a pen. He wrote a number large enough for every camera in the room to capture. 25,000. That's the number of jobs Amazon promised to bring to Long Island City, Queens, in 2019. Your district, Representative. Average salary, $150,000 per year. That's not minimum wage. That's not gig work. That's 25,000 middle-class careers for the people you say you represent. He wrote a second number beneath the first. $3.75 billion a year in wages. 25,000 jobs at $150,000, $3.75 billion a year, flowing into your community, into your district, into the pockets of working families in the Bronx and Queens. He set down the pen and looked at AOC. You eliminated it. AOC straightened. I opposed corporate welfare. Amazon was receiving $3 billion in tax incentives. tax incentives, Representative. Not a check, not cash from a vault. Incentives, meaning Amazon would have paid reduced taxes on money they earned by employing 25,000 of your constituents. The $3 billion wasn't taken from anyone. It was future revenue the city agreed to discount in exchange for the jobs. He held up a document. Your own governor, Andrew Cuomo, called it, and quoting, "the greatest tragedy I've seen since I've been in government." He turned to a new page, but here's what happened next. Amazon left. The 25,000 jobs vanished. And then, months later, Amazon opened a small office in a different part of Manhattan outside your district with 1,500 jobs. No incentives, no deal. Just 1,500 positions instead of 25,000. He wrote the math on the legal pad. 25,000 promised, 1,500 delivered, different district. 23,500 jobs lost equals 94% reduction. And you took a victory lap. He pulled out a screenshot of AOC's tweet celebrating the news. You celebrated losing 94% of the jobs in my district in Ohio, Representative. If a factory shut down and then reopened at 6% capacity in the next town over, no one would call that winning. They'd call it a disaster. But you called it progress. AOC's voice rose. The Amazon deal was fundamentally flawed. It would have driven up rents, crowded subways. Let me tell you about someone who didn't get to weigh in on your decision. Vance opened the folder now and pulled out a printed page. This is from the Queen's Economic Development Council. After Amazon pulled out small businesses in Long Island City, the ones that would have benefited from 25,000 new customers walking past their doors every day, reported a 31% drop in projected revenue. 3 commercial real estate projects were canceled. A local construction union lost an estimated 400 jobs before a single shovel hit the ground. He set the paper down. You eliminated 25,000 jobs for your district. Then you celebrated when 6% of them showed up somewhere else, Representative. If a doctor lost 94% of her patients and called it a success, she'd lose her license, but you called it a victory lap. Vance flipped to the next section, and then there's the Green New Deal, your signature legislative proposal. He wrote another number on the legal pad, slowly, deliberately letting every digit land. $93 trillion. That's the estimated cost of implementing the goals you outlined in your Green New Deal resolution. $93 trillion, more than 4 times the current national debt, more than the entire world's GDP. He looked at AOC. And when someone asked you how you'd pay for it, you said, and quoting your tweet, "The Green New Deal costs us 0 if passed because it's a non-binding resolution of values." He let the word sit in the room. 0. You proposed restructuring the entire American economy, eliminating fossil fuels, guaranteeing jobs for everyone, rebuilding every building in the country. And when asked the price, you said it was free because it was just a resolution. He paused. That's not economics, Representative. That's a bumper sticker. And your own chief of staff, the same man who managed your dark money pipeline, told a reporter the quiet part out loud. He said the Green New Deal wasn't really a climate thing, he said. It was about how you changed the entire economy. Vance closed the folder. You came here today to lecture me about the working class, but the working class in your district lost 25,000 jobs because you decided Amazon was a better political target than employer. The working class across America watched you propose a $93 trillion plan and call it free. And the working class, the actual working class, not the one you perform on Instagram, is paying attention. He reached for the fourth folder. Now let's talk about what you've actually accomplished in Congress, because that number is even more interesting than 93 trillion. Vance opened the fourth folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper. He held it up, a chart with 2 columns printed large enough for the cameras. This is from the Center for Effective Lawmaking, a nonpartisan research project run jointly by Vanderbilt University and the University of Virginia. They rank every member of Congress based on how many bills they introduce, how many advance through committee, how many reach a floor vote, and how many become law. He pointed to a highlighted line. Representative Ocasio-Cortez ranked 230th out of 240 Democrats, last among all 19 Democrats from New York State. Dead last. He turned the paper toward AOC, 21 substantive bills introduced, 0 received action in committee, 0 reached a floor vote, 0 became law. He set the paper down and wrote on his legal pad 3 lines, each one a gut punch. Bills introduced 21. Bills that became law, 0. Twitter followers, 13 million plus. 13 million followers, 0 laws. You have a bigger audience than most cable news networks, and you have produced less legislation than a first-term backbencher from a district nobody's heard of. AOC's jaw tightened. Legislative effectiveness isn't measured by bill count alone. I've pushed national conversations on climate, on health care, on conversations. Vance repeated the word without inflection, letting it hang. You've pushed conversations, not laws, not policies, not outcomes. Conversations. He pulled out a second document. The professor who runs the study said, and I'm quoting, she introduced a lot of bills, but she was not successful at having them receive any sort of action in committee. If they can't get through committee, they cannot pass the House. He also noted that even compared to other freshmen, she underperformed. Vance set the quote down. Your colleagues, the people who work beside you every day, told reporters that your approach was, and I'll use their word, alienating. You alienated the people you needed to pass your own legislation. Then you went on Twitter and told 13 million followers you were fighting for them. He leaned forward slightly. Representative in the private sector, the world I came from before politics, if someone had 13 million followers and 0 results, call them an influencer. In Congress, you're supposed to be a legislator. Legislation that never passes isn't service. It's content. Press releases aren't policy. They're marketing. And a 0% success rate isn't a record. It's a resume for a different job. AOC pushed back hard. I have moved the Overton window on climate policy, on health care, on economic justice. The Green New Deal framework was adopted. You moved the window. You didn't pass a bill. Vance's voice was steady, unimpressed. Moving windows is what commentators do. Passing laws is what legislators do. Your constituents sent you to Congress to pass laws, not to move windows. They can watch cable news for that. He shifted to the second section of the folder, and his tone changed. Not softer, more careful. I want to address one more thing, Representative. January 6, 2021. The room went quiet. Even the gallery stopped rustling. January 6th was a dark day. What happened at the Capitol was wrong, period. No qualifiers, no buts. I've said that publicly, and I'll say it again here. Anyone who broke into that building and threatened the lives of members of Congress and police officers should face the full weight of the law. He paused, letting the acknowledgement land. But you told America you nearly lost your life that day. You described a harrowing experience, someone banging on your door screaming, "Where is she?" You said, and I'm quoting your Instagram Live, "I thought I was going to die." He pulled out a building diagram, the Capitol complex with the main Capitol and the surrounding office buildings clearly labeled. You were not in the Capitol building, Representative. You were in the Cannon House office building, a separate building across the street connected by underground tunnels. The trespassers entered the Capitol. They did not enter the Cannon building. He pointed to the diagram. Your colleague, Representative Nancy Mace, a Republican whose office is 2 doors from yours in the same hallway, said publicly that trespassers never stormed our hallway. The person who banged on your door and yelled, "Where is she?" was a Capitol Police officer. He was there to evacuate you, to protect you. Vance set the diagram down. You turned a police officer doing his job into a near-fatal experience, and you used that story for 3 years to build your brand, to fundraise, to generate millions of views on social media. I'm not questioning whether you were scared. Fear is real, and it doesn't require logic. But I am questioning whether a congresswoman should turn fear into a 3-year content franchise while the officer who was trying to save her life never got a public thank you. AOC's eyes glistened, her voice was strained but fierce. As a woman of color serving in Congress, I receive severe threats every single day. You have no idea what I believe you, Vance said. No sarcasm, no edge, just a flat statement of fact. The threats are real, they're criminal, they're disgusting, and anyone who makes them should face justice. He let the acknowledgement sit. But the threats against you don't make your legislation more effective. They don't turn zero bills into law. They don't bring back 25,000 jobs. They don't explain where $885,000 went, and they don't change the fact that you were in a different building. He closed the 4th folder. One more thing, Representative, then I'm done. Vance set all 4 folders aside. He took off his glasses and placed them on the dais. For the first time in the hearing, he spoke without documents, without notes, without anything between himself and the woman sitting 10 feet below him. You came into this room to destroy me. You called me a poverty tourist, a fake populist, a con artist. You mocked my book, my marriage, my military service, and the worst moments of my family's life. He stood, partially leaning forward on both hands. So let's compare side by side, honestly. You called me a fake populist. I grew up in Middletown, Ohio, where the factories closed and the opioids arrived. You grew up in Yorktown Heights, a suburb where the median household income is nearly 3 times the national average. Which one of us had the fake working class experience? You called me a sellout. I wrote a book about my life, and every word in it has been fact-checked for nearly a decade by journalists who wanted it to be false. Your campaign funneled $885,000 through shell companies that don't have to report their spending. Which one of us is hiding something? You called me a poverty tourist. I served in the military. You wore a designer dress to a $35,000 gala where you told the rich to pay more while accepting free tickets and discounted luxury goods. Which one of us visited someone else's world for a night and then went home? You said I exploit working people. I never eliminated 25,000 jobs in my district for a political headline. You did, and then you celebrated. You said my story was manufactured. My story is in a book. Your campaign finances are in a black box. He straightened. The pattern is always the same, Representative. You announce a principle, you violate it, and when someone catches you, you call them a racist, a sexist, or a right-wing conspiracy theorist. Dark money is evil, but you built a dark money pipeline. Tax the rich, but you wore a designer gown to a billionaire gala. Fight for the working class, but you eliminated 25,000 jobs and called it victory. Hold Congress accountable, but your own legislative record is 0. Tell the truth, but you told America you nearly lost your life, while your neighbor says the rioters never entered your hallway. His voice dropped to something just above a whisper, which somehow made it louder than anything Head said all morning. You came here to expose me as a fraud, but the evidence says the fraud is sitting at the witness table, not on the dais. He looked at her for a long moment. The room was silent. Even the camera shutters had stopped. Who are you really, Representative Ocasio-Cortez? Not the brand. Not the Instagram character, not the tweets and the slogans and the designer dresses with political messages painted on the back. Who are you when the cameras are off and the followers can't see? I know who I am. The son of a woman who couldn't stay clean and a town that couldn't stay open. A Marine. A lawyer. A father. And a man who wrote the truth about his own family because he thought it might help someone else's. You're a congresswoman who hasn't passed a single law, who eliminated 25,000 jobs, who funneled campaign money through dark channels, and who called a $93 trillion plan free. He sat down. That's not public service, that's a brand. And today the brand is bankrupt. He nodded to the chairman. I have no further questions. The silence held for 6 full seconds. AOC sat motionless, her prepared binders untouched, her staff frozen behind her. A single pen had rolled off her table and lay on the carpet, and no one bent to pick it up. AOC leaned to her counsel, a whispered exchange, urgent, clipped. Then she turned to the microphone. Mr. Chairman, I'm requesting a recess. Grassley nodded. The committee stands in recess. AOC rose, her staff closed around her. She walked toward the corridor without looking back, her heels clicking against marble in a room so quiet the sound carried to every microphone, still hot on the dais. Reporters called after her, Representative, would you like to respond? Representative, what about the FEC filings? But she was already through the door. She did not return. At 1:15 p.m., her chief of staff appeared and informed the chairman that Representative Ocasio-Cortez was unavailable for the remainder of the hearing and would submit written responses to any outstanding questions. Vance organized his folders into a neat stack, finished his water, and nodded to Chairman Grassley. He walked out of the hearing room without speaking to a single reporter. The clip of Vance writing 25,000, 1,594% loss. Victory lap on his legal pad hit 45 million views before the committee room had been cleared. But it was the combat boots versus designer dress line that broke the internet, shared, remixed, set to music, turned into memes that crossed every platform and every language within hours. Zero bills trended for 4 days. Content creator, not congresswoman, became the most used political hashtag of the month. Someone created a parody account called at AOC's legislative record that posted nothing, literally nothing. No tweets, no content, just a blank feed, and it gained 800,000 followers in 48 hours. CNN's post-hearing coverage was visibly uncomfortable. Jake Tapper called it the most methodical dismantling of a political brand I've seen on camera, and noted that Vance had relied almost entirely on public records, official findings, and the Congresswoman's own words. When a Democratic strategist attempted to frame it as punching down, Tapper's co-anchor pointed out that AOC had initiated the attack and Vance had simply responded. The strategist did not have a rebuttal. MSNBC's Rachel Maddow devoted a segment to analyzing whether the hearing was fair. Her conclusion, delivered with the enthusiasm of someone swallowing medicine, was that the vice president was scrupulous about distinguishing between established facts and open questions, and Representative Ocasio-Cortez was given every opportunity to respond. Fox News ran the highlights on a loop for 72 hours, but the most surprising coverage came from the New York Times, which published an editorial titled The Accountability Gap, urging AOC to provide a full accounting of the PAC to LLC transfers and to address the Center for Effective Lawmaking rankings. The Washington Post fact-checked Vance's claims and rated them largely accurate, noting that several characterizations were pointed but supported by official documents and public records. The political fallout moved quickly. Within a week, the House Ethics Committee announced it was expanding its inquiry beyond the Met Gala to include a review of AOC's campaign disbursement patterns, specifically the transfers flagged in the FEC complaint. The committee's bipartisan statement was 3 sentences long and contained the phrase additional questions warranting examination, which in Washington is the equivalent of a fire alarm. Squad members rallied around AOC, but the defense was notably thin. Rashida Tlaib issued a statement supporting AOC's right to defend herself against partisan attacks, a formulation that defended the person without defending any of the specific allegations. Ilhan Omar posted a tweet about the weaponization of hearings against women of color that was liked by progressive activists and ignored by everyone else. Ayanna Pressley said nothing at all. Nancy Pelosi, asked about the hearing at a press conference the following Tuesday, delivered the kind of response that only sounds supportive if you don't listen carefully. Every member of Congress should be able to explain their financial disclosures and their legislative effectiveness to the people they represent. That's not a partisan standard. That's the basic expectation of the job. In Washington, that was a shove off a cliff disguised as a handshake. AOC's response came 11 days later, a pre-recorded video posted to her own channels with no live questions, no follow-ups, and no Vance sitting across the table with more folders. She called the hearing a coordinated right-wing spectacle designed to silence a working-class woman of color. She cited the severe threats Shed received. She reminded viewers of Trump's history of attacking her. She did not address the FEC complaint. She did not explain the PAC to LLC transfers. She did not respond to the Center for Effective Lawmaking rankings. She did not address the Met Gala ethics finding. She did not correct the record on January 6th. She did not explain how eliminating 25,000 jobs was a victory. 2 paragraphs of nothing. The internet noticed the electoral damage accumulated with the patient relentlessness of gravity. Within 6 weeks, a primary challenger emerged. Elena Vasquez, 38 years old, a CPA and first-generation Dominican-American from the South Bronx. Vasquez had run a small accounting firm for 11 years, employed 14 people, and had never held political office. Her announcement video was 60 seconds long. She looked into the camera and said, "Our district doesn't need a brand, it needs a representative. Our families need jobs, not tweets. Our community needs results, not content. I'm running because a 0% legislative success rate is not good enough for the people of the Bronx and Queens." The video raised $3.8 million in small dollar donations in its first month, unprecedented for a primary challenge in a district AOC had held since 2018. 3 of 5 union locals in the district declined to endorse AOC for the first time, citing concerns about legislative effectiveness and constituent priorities. Polling showed AOC's approval in her district had dropped 14 points overall and 21 points among voters over 50. The investigations continued. Federal auditors issued subpoenas for the complete financial records of Brand New Congress, LLC. A former associate of Saikat Chakrabarty, cooperating under a separate inquiry, provided sworn testimony about the routing of funds through the organization. The Treasury Department flagged several transactions for further review. Prediction markets, the places where people wager real money on political outcomes, listed AOC among the top 10 House members most likely to face formal federal charges before the next election cycle. None of it was planned. Vance did no victory tour. He gave no follow-up interviews about the hearing. When asked by a reporter from Politico whether he regretted the personal nature of the confrontation, he answered with the directness that had defined the entire exchange. "She attacked my family, my mother, my poverty. She called my life story a fraud." I responded with public documents and her own words. If her own record is personal, that's not my problem, that's hers. In Queens, New York, a woman named Maria Chen, 55 years old, Taiwanese American, sat in the apartment Shed moved into after closing her bakery on Vernon Boulevard in 2022. The bakery had been there for 9 years. It was 3 blocks from the site where Amazon's HQ2 would have been built. When the deal collapsed, foot traffic projections for the neighborhood collapsed with it. 2 other small businesses on her block closed within a year. Maria held on for 3 more. Then the math finally won. She watched the hearing from her kitchen table. When Vance wrote 25,000 on his legal pad, Maria set down her tea. When he wrote 1,500 below it, she nodded slowly. When he said victory lap for a 94% loss, she pressed her lips together hard, the expression of a woman who had spent 3 years explaining to her former employees why their jobs no longer existed. When AOC requested a recess and walked out of the room, Maria turned off the television. She sat in the quiet for a moment. Then she said to no one in particular, 25,000 jobs. I only needed one of them. She rinsed her cup, placed it in the rack, and looked out the window at a neighborhood that was still waiting for something that was never going to arrive. You just watched what happens when someone attacks a man who actually lived the story they're pretending to tell, who survived the poverty they're performing, who wore the uniform they're borrowing as a costume. Every American who still believes that the working class deserves representatives who actually work should be able to explain where the money went, where the jobs went, and why zero bills became law on a $174,000 salary. The investigations are just beginning. The Ethics Committee is expanding its inquiry. The FEC is pulling records. The primary challenger is gaining. And somewhere in Middletown, Ohio, a man who actually grew up poor is reading briefing papers and waiting patiently, quietly, for the next person who wants to lecture him about the working class. God bless our veterans who know the difference between service and performance. God bless every small business owner who lost their shop while politicians took victory laps. She came to attack, he came with receipts. Only one of them stayed in the room, and the working class, the real one, was watching.